Hello, everybody, and welcome to Riftboundramblings. I'm your host, Barrett, and today is a very different video. I wanted to do something like this out of recommendation given to me by somebody, and as we are quickly approaching the release date of Riftbound Origins, I'm going to do a budget deck upgrade for the Proving Grounds decks. So, the question here is that you bought a Proving Grounds, and you might have one of the decks because you split it with three of your friends, or you have all four of the decks, because why wouldn't you buy a product that gives you four pre-made decks for like 30 bucks or whatever? But although Master Yi is one of the more competitive characters in the game, the decks don't necessarily compete at that kind of similar level. But also, maybe you're struggling to get some product in the beginning of the release. Well, that's what this video is for. This video is going to do a small deck upgrade of all four of these decks with only using commons and uncommons, basically. And I'm going to give a recommendation of two rares at the end of each of these deck upgrades because hopefully there's just enough of those in the supply for you to get some of those at a cheap amount. So these are going to be some budget upgrades, and without further ado, we're going to dive in. Kicking things off, we've got the Annie deck. For the beginning of all of these, I'm going to go over the deck as a whole and what it succeeds in and what it doesn't do well necessarily right out of the box. Of course, each of these decks only come with one battlefield, so of course, for us to play these at a 1v1 level and at a real level, we're going to go ahead and add two more battlefields as well. But basically, this deck is all about playing these two-cost spells on your opponent's turn because you're always going to guarantee to have two runes. But what it does struggle to do sometimes is not necessarily like have strong units. So it's got to be really good at like doing these kind of tricks and having kind of units on the battlefields as much as you can. But it isn't aggro. So we're going to focus mainly on the aggro part of this deck. So the battlefields mean, well, we need to speed up the game. We need to play things like the Arena's Greatest, and we need to tell everybody that, hey, we're all going to start with an extra point. I need this game to be a little bit quicker. So we're going to add this to our battlefield deck. It's an uncommon. You can probably get your hands on this. It's not going to be too hard. And in the same idea, to go and kind of complement the Void Gate, which helps us do a little bit more damage, we're also going to use a lot of our defensive spells on our own units. So the Dreaming Tree is going to be a pretty good option here. Specifically things like Flash and some of the extra cards that we are going to be adding in as well. You can target your own units with to keep them alive, and then you'll get to draw a bonus card because we do go through our deck pretty quickly. So let's move on to the commons and uncommons. So right off the bat, if you're going to be playing Chaos, I recommend Stacked Deck. It just helps you look for the things that you're really, really looking for, and it only costs one energy, so you can easily play this from on your opponent's turn or on your own turn. It doesn't really matter. And then some of those extra 2-cost spells that we were talking about that are tricks is things like Ride the Wind, which is move a friendly unit and ready it. You can move this wherever, doesn't matter where, uh, as long as you know it's to a battlefield to your base or to your base to a battlefield, and it readies it up so it can move once again. But this can save a unit, or it can help you go onto another battlefield if you're trying to do multiple in a turn. And then, of course, Fight or Flight. This is probably one of the best reasons to be playing Chaos right now. And, of course, as Annie, we always have the energy to pay for it. But basically, you can move a unit from a battlefield to its base. This includes your opponent's units. So when they attack into you, you can send it right back, and you can kind of keep control of a battlefield. And then the extra kind of common I picked right here is Nox is Hopeful. You're really good at spending any amount of energy to play one card on your turn, basically, whether it's a low-cost unit like a Pouty Poro or a Traveling Merchant. So things like Nox is Hopeful also become a 2-cost unit. And again, if you tap out completely on your turn, it's okay. You're going to have the 2 runes ready because of Annie. So as my last little recommendation, we talk about some rares. I think the biggest ones to really talk about are things like Darius and Vi. Vi works really well in this deck because it recycles things back into your deck for playing a very high-costed 2 energy unit, and it can get up in power if you if you need it to, as well as it having ganking. So if you use a cool trick like a Fight or Flight, the Vi can then power herself up again and then immediately move to the other battlefield if you keep her alive. Darius, of course, makes a lot of sense. If you play him second or he's on the field and you play a second card, it just allows you to give him some extra power and immediately ready and go into it. He just functions as like a better piece to get onto the board than things like Tibbers. So before I move on to the next deck, I'll go ahead and give some recommendations on cards to cut. I think if you're gonna get your hands on more of these two cost tricks that Annie is really good at, things like Firestorm don't really make the cut in my opinion, and I would even maybe even consider cutting things like Morbid Return, which is another two cost trick, but you just don't really need it. You could also cut some of these Annie champion units, as you know, the Fury Domain one is not really what our deck is trying to do, but the Chaos one does give some pretty good value, picking up another card from our discard pile. As for the rares, again, I think Tibbers, we're an aggro deck. We don't really want to be playing an 8 cost unit, even for the board wipe ability. And I think Psy Scout is fine because you can play it at an open battlefield, which might end up happening. But I think Vi could easily just take the place of like any of these 2 cost units you're not a fan of, or even the Madden Marauder. But I kind of like Madden Marauder, so I think you can keep that one in. Moving on to Master Yi, this deck is pretty straightforward. It's very good at defending. It wants to be on a battlefield with one unit, and so you want to be able to do that as much as you can. That being said, there's a little bit of mismatching coming on here because there's some pretty high-costed units in this deck, but the low-cost units are how you get onto battlefields, and hopefully you stay onto those battlefields. The deck comes with Fortified Position, which is honestly not a bad battlefield for this character, so we don't really mind keeping that one, but we do need to play 2 more for us to have a legal deck in 1v1, which means we're going to pick a good one like Grove of the God Willow. Again, it's an uncommon, so you should be able to find this one, and Master Yi is one of the best characters or legends at holding a base or holding a battlefield, so this one's going to help you get a little bit of extra generation, and honestly, your opponents are going to be way worse at doing this than your opponent or than yourself. Next up, Dreaming Tree. We have this one for Annie as well, but Master Yi is going to be very good at doing it already from cards in the deck like On Guard, and we're going to be playing a couple more that I'm going to recommend here shortly. So moving on to the commons and uncommons, specifically things like Defy and Charm are the real reason to be playing Calm, and you're the only Calm deck in this entire product. So there's a real benefit here of getting access to these, specifically Charm. Defy is a little like preparing yourself for later, maybe if you want to level up Yi a little bit more, but Discipline is a great uncommon for you to pick up for this deck, and it will help you use Dreaming Tree very, very well. And then First Mate is the biggest unit I recommend in the common slot because it's really just going to help you move your units around a little bit better so that you can still win the game when you need to and conquer some battlefields. For rares, obviously the big ones are going to be Kiana. This is just one of the best competitive cards for Body Domain, not even just in Master Yi, but getting the On Conquer effect is the hardest part for this card, and then Master Yi keeps her alive a little bit well. And then, of course, Zoni's Hourglass is a great one to use because as we're only really going to be using one unit on a base at a time, Zoni's Hourglass gives us a refund of that unit that we can maybe go and put somewhere else. For cards to cut, I'm basically going to recommend a lot of this top end to go away. Mountain Drake is fine because it doesn't cost any power, but if you spend your whole turn playing a Mountain Drake without other units on the board to like do a thing, it's probably not that great. I'm not a big fan of Gentleman's Duel, so I'd maybe cut that. Stormclaw Ursine is fine, but again, I don't like that one. Zephyr's Sage, probably don't recommend because it costs the power, but I don't mind keeping things like Playful Phantom, at least for the starter deck. Um, so things like First Mate, I think, can come in for some of these top high-end units, and I do think these kind of utility spells like Discipline, Defy, and Charm just kind of take the place of the spells that are just not really cutting it, like Cannon Barrage. Honestly, the Calm Domain Master Yi can kind of make a cut, as really the Body Domain one is the shining star for this deck. Oh boy. Moving on. We've got Garen here, and if you haven't heard, Garen is basically one of the worst legends in the entire game. Hopefully that changes in the future, but that means this deck is going to need a lot of love. The real point is that obviously Garen gets to draw if you have 4 or more units conquer a battlefield. So that means they have to live, but you get to draw 2 cards. It comes with Trifarian War Camp, so when you swing with your units, because you're tracking with a bunch of them, your might goes up pretty dramatically for each unit that you're swinging with, which makes a lot of sense, which means we're going to have to be making a lot of units. So because we need to make more units, we're going to play bases or battlefields like Altar to Unity. If you end up holding it, I don't know how good at that you're going to be, honestly. But if you do, you get an extra recruit in your base. And it being in your base matters because it's another unit for you to swing with Garen. And then, yes, we're going to play the Grand Plaza, which is an alternate win con because, honestly, this character needs it. And you're hopefully in some games just going to run away and create a bunch of recruits to kind of help you get onto the board. And This is a really cool alt win con that sometimes your opponents are so worried about playing around that you can just win the game and hold on to a different battlefield instead. Moving on to the commons, obviously the name of the game is going to be recruits, so I went ahead and named Vanguard Captain. This is a good one that we need to really get into our deck because we need to be able to make more recruits. And then, of course, other low-cost units help the deck out as well, things like Soaring Scout, and it will help you get some refunds on some power costs in this deck. And then, of course, we are one of the 2 decks in this product that gives us the order domain, so we should probably be playing the very, very good removal, which includes things like Hidden Blade and Cold the Weak. Cold the Weak is very good in this deck because you have recruits. You don't mind killing those off if it kills off something more important on your opponent's side of the board. And Hidden Blade is very good because if you're going to lose a battlefield, you can just target one of your own recruits or something that's going to die anyway, and you can draw 2 cards. So it gives you some hand refill, as well as if something huge hits the board on the enemy side, you have something to deal with it. For the rares, it's really not that important, but again, name of the game is recruits. So I recommend Machine Evangel, which when it dies, which your opponent's going to have to eventually kill your stuff, you get to get 3 recruits back at your base. And then, of course, what do we need to do to sometimes win, not just with our little guys? We need to make them big. So Grand Stratagem, I recommend. Maybe not as a full 3 of, but I do recommend finding some way to get this card into your deck. Cards to remove, man. Decisive Strike to me is the easiest one because we're going to be trying to put in things like Grand Stratagem. But I do recommend keeping things like Recruit the Vanguard because it does just help you get recruits on the board. Other than that, we just want to get rid of some of these kind of mid-rangey cards. So like Dune Drake is whatever. Petty Officer is fine. This Vanguard Sergeant is just a vanilla. You don't really need it. But, I maybe would keep things like Vanguard Attendant because it comes in ready and maybe it wins you the game. I'm not entirely sure, to be honest. I think you'll figure it out pretty fast. I'd maybe also recommend cutting the body domain Garen. He's just really not that great. And the order domain one does just fine. Moving on to the last deck. A little bit harder for this deck to win only because it's a control style and it's really fighting against these sort of mid-range and aggro decks in the same product. But it's not that bad of a list on its own, and specifically a lot of these high-cost spells that make Lux work are really the best ones for you to be playing anyway. Things like Falling Comet, Blast of Power, Singularity, these are the good ones, so I'm not going to recommend a ton of them. But Battlefield's first, of course, we come with Star-Tipped Peak, which, when you hold there, you get to channel another rune. You're not very good at doing that, but it's still fine. But what you need to do is extend the game a little bit further. So Aspirant's Climb helps by doing that, by making it be 1 more point. And honestly, if you whip this one out of the table, a lot of people sometimes get mad. And if you end up playing with like another deck that wants to like ramp and go to the late game, you might end up actually extending the game by multiple points, which is kind of funny. Next up, I recommend things like Obelisk of Power, which in a sideways version, it doesn't make the game go longer, but it helps you get to more energy quicker, which helps you cast these high-cost spells to get some value from your legend, of course. So those are the 2 that I recommend. Moving on to the commons and uncommons, very much similarly to Garen, I do recommend Soaring Scout and Cold the Weak. Soaring Scout because it channels you runes, which we need to be doing, and Cold the Weak more often than not, you just don't really have any units on the field at the beginning of the game, so this just helps you wipe away the board and then get yourself onto it itself. Again, channeling more runes. Things like Retreat are one of the best cards you can play in Mind, and you can just use it to save one of your own units, channel a rune exhausted, save the unit that you did bounce, and then because you don't have any units again, things like Cold the Weak feel a little better. And then the last one I recommend, it is an uncommon, but Sprite Mother is not bad. It just helps you get some points early, which this deck is just not very good at doing without putting your units at risk. And the little sprite that it makes, you don't care if it dies because you're just trying to get a victory point early on. So this one's not bad, but I do caution spending this power on it pretty early on in the game. You're gonna need those runes. For the rares, this one's pretty straightforward. You just want to play the good ones in the Mind domain, really. Thousand-Tailed Watcher is one of the staples for this domain. You want to grab this card basically whenever you can if you plan on playing this domain at all. And then Echo, I think, is a good recommendation specifically for this deck. Because if you eventually get to all of your runes being in play, like 12 or 10 of them or whatever, when this dies, it really, really matters because you get them all back. It can lead to turns where you sometimes could potentially cast 6 cost or 5 cost spells twice in a turn, which is crazy. It also has Accelerate, helps you get on the board a little bit better. But things to cut, honestly, I don't like Final Spark. I think you can just cut it. Mega Mech is fine, but I'd recommend you be spending that energy on spells instead. And then if you want to make room for things like these lower cost cards, things like Vanguard Sergeant aren't really needed for this deck, but I do recommend things like Lecturing Yordle, Eager Apprentice, and maybe even Ravenbloom Student to stay in the deck. And Daring Poro's fine, but things that should stay are Falling Comets, Blast of Powers, and Singularities. Those are the good ones. So that's really it. I hope you enjoyed a video like this. I don't normally do content like this. I really plan on still really being a news and updates video. But with the release of the first set and Origins coming out, I wanted to give a little bit of a recommendation for some people that might be worried about getting product. And, you know, it's just little budget upgrades. Because for people that want to get involved with the game, there are really real ways to increase the power level of your decks without investing into things like things higher than a rare. But if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. Comment down below if you like what I recommended or if you have any better recommendations. There are plenty of commons and uncommons, of course, for you to do and do some upgrading. And if you plan on just playing things like 4-player and casual games, there are plenty of other cards that make those formats a lot more fun. And of course, subscribe to the channel so you never miss a video. And I hope to see you in the next one.